Imagine expanding your team's abilities without adding headcount. With Element 451, AI assistants like admissions advisors and student success coaches work alongside your staff to deliver personalized experiences at scale, offer round the clock support, and uncover data driven insights. It's not just about doing more, it's about doing it smarter. Elevate your team with an AI workforce that delivers personalized, scalable, and impactful experiences across the student lifecycle. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome to the Hired Geek Podcast, where each week we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experiences. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome back, everyone, to another special live episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast here at South by Southwest EDU in Austin, Texas. We're having some great conversations this whole week with a variety of folks across the entire higher ed ecosystem. And I'm excited to have this conversation with Diego from the Carnegie Foundation that I feel like I'm going to be learning more, or at least like appreciating more of the work that I feel is like, oh yes, I know of the work of the Carnegie Foundation, but I'll be learning more about it alongside all of our listeners. So Diego, if you want to introduce yourself, your role, and tell folks a little bit more about what the Carnegie Foundation does.
Yeah, sure. My name is Diego Arambula. I'm the Vice President for Educational Transformation at the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. It is a mouthful. I have to take a breath after saying that full title. At the Carnegie Foundation, we are deeply in the mindset that what we've got to do is to try and create more economic opportunity for young people across this country. We're attacking that in two ways. We have a whole effort around high school transformation, and then we have a whole effort around post-secondary innovation, because we recognize that education plays a vital role in that economic opportunity for young people, especially for those furthest from opportunity. And today, I think we're going to be focusing mostly on the post-secondary sector and the role that it has to play as a key lever in driving towards economic opportunity for young people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're all on the same team kind of thing. You know, everything's impactful, and that's what's great about South by is I think you're getting all those different folks, you know, from across the education spectrum together. But, you know, you have a long history and some very profound pieces of higher education, but you're continuing sort of that impactful work today and everything. And I'm curious, I guess, just before we get too far talking about all that, you know, nearing the end of South by EDU, curious, any reflections of some cool stuff that you've seen or heard, people you've met, talked to, just reflections on the event so far?
One amazing piece that I had an opportunity to meet with the author of Who Needs College Anyway. The title of the book might suggest that it's like, oh, let's just throw college out the door. In fact, I think so much of the title is, how might we build additional pathways to economic opportunity? And what role do colleges and universities, 2 years, 4 years, have to play in that? I found that really provocative, really interesting. It mirrors really closely something that the president of the Carnegie Foundation, Tim Knowles, wrote about a few weeks ago, where he called to question, the college degree is 120 units. We came up with that a whole long time ago. There's no real reason that it needs to be 120. Why couldn't it be 119? At some point, you know, we keep hearing about 3-year degrees. There is a need for us to radically reimagine and rethink this question of what is a college degree? How many units does it take? Do we even need to think about it in units? How do we think about it in learning? I think Kathleen's book was provocative toward that end, and I'm excited to see other folks thinking about it and pushing in these ways.
Yeah, we'll have Kathleen. I mean, as a recording of this, it's in the future for me, but the space-time continuum and everything will be a little bit different, like this episode releases, but I've already had the conversation. But yeah, I'm excited to talk to Kathleen about that book for a forthcoming episode of the podcast. And I think, yeah, like that that provocative title is, I think, what people are grappling with. How do we kind of challenge notions of things that, have been around for so long? We just kind of accept them as natural law. And sometimes for better or worse, like we start to realize how sort of like fragile those things can be or should be, where it's like, well, let's try to like get a little more flexibility here. Certainly, yeah, like the 3-year bachelors is a very good example that folks are kind of having those conversations to see where those opportunities lie. But this event and everything that we're like kind of talking about with all of our interviews here, is happening in a moment that is very turbulent and ambiguous for higher ed. We're trying to kind of, maintain relevance and kind of figure out the ways that we can hold on to sort of what makes higher ed unique and valuable, while not sacrificing, any of those things. So this is like a big question. We'll start here and sort of, I think, just dig a little bit deeper. But like from your vantage point, like how do you see the work you do continuing to drive sustainable improvements and innovation in higher ed amidst all this turbulence and ambiguity? Because I think like people sometimes get too caught up in sort of like, these things that are happening or whatever. It's like, well, you still need to like, try to find that balance of like focusing on the present moment while still looking to the future. So how do you see sort of like that sort of dynamic or that sort of balance where I think people get so focused on like the turbulence, they're not even understanding like, well, we're still moving forward. Like we still have to keep moving forward. We can't just sort of like, stop. So curious, I guess, your perspective on that.
It's one of the most amazing parts about working at a place like the Carnegie Foundation. It's existed since 1906. And so in some ways, we have this beautiful benefit of being able to constantly remind ourselves, this too shall pass. And that we've been at this work for 120 years. And so we keep thinking about what's the next 50, what's the next 120 years. And so often in education, in the nonprofit space, that is not something that we're thinking about. We're sort of thinking about exactly what's right in front of us and what I need to do tomorrow. And, I think about my time in the classroom and my time leading a school. I was not thinking about that classroom in that school. 5-10 years after that, I was thinking about 5-10 minutes. So at the Carnegie Foundation, we've been thinking a ton about that. One of the ways in which we've been doing that is to really go back to what is the purpose of the post-secondary sector. And that's why we keep saying it is a vital engine for economic opportunity. It has to be a vital engine for economic opportunity. And so one of our biggest initiatives at the moment is to reimagine the Carnegie classifications. We brought those into the world 50 years ago. They were originally built to help better define universities for researchers and policymakers. We've updated some of those classifications. We just rolled out the new research classifications a couple of weeks ago in ways that we believe is going to really help both researchers and universities be better defined, but also help drive research dollars to the places who are doing research and truly need it. But we're most excited about the new institutional classifications and student access and earnings classifications that are coming out in a couple of months. And that we hope is part of the work that can help build for 10, 20, 30 years down the road. So really excited to have sort of that vantage point and agree that too often we can get caught up in the swirl of what's in the newspaper today.
That's what I think some people have talked about, some of the interviews we've had and some of the sessions I've been in, and that idea of like, what are the things we can do today that we'd be so grateful for that we did, like 10, 20 years from now, we'd reflect back, be like, oh my God, we're so glad that we like made that right investment or, did whatever else. So, and that's what I hope, I guess, is that like, higher ed, institutions are these venerable kind of, flagships for their states and their regions and different things. And that like, they've lasted for a long time through all this sort of, turbulence over the years and everything, and just knowing that that is not just sort of like, again, a natural law kind of thing. Like, you do have to be smart, be aware, be responsive to like the circumstances, but find that right balance of understanding the current present moment and context that you exist within, but also making those smart investments. So I think that's kind of where my mind was going. Some of those things you mentioned where it's just like, those are like big seismic, like for the entire sector, like these different classifications and things. And, that those matter and those do have impact and stuff. And that, not to, I guess, overlook what, those sort of investments will mean, like, heading more into the future. So, and I guess, I'm curious, I guess, from your vantage point again, and, as part of a organization that has been around for so long, obviously, digital transformation, we talk about it a lot on this show. Like, what do you see as some of the most like positively impactful ways digital transformation is like reshaping higher ed? Because I think, again, like a deliberately just broad open question, but like as you're sort of, seeing from your vantage point, I think we're kind of riding on this like digital transformation roller coaster of like, kind of a lot of twists and turns, a lot of, different ways that institutions are approaching, how they, integrate online courses or, just different tools for collaboration and communication or anything else. So from your point of view, digital transformation, how is it sort of showing up in a positive way for higher ed?
Well, maybe the best way I can speak to this, I should note, I'm also the vice chair for the California State University Board of Trustees. So some of the answer I'm about to give you is a little bit with that CSU hat on. And what I would say is when I joined the board almost 5 years ago, the CSU was not in a place to really, and maybe I'll even back up and just say, it's helpful for me to remember that an institution as large as the CSU, serving 460,000 students, is not a monolith. If it were a monolith, the sentence I was about to say is the CSU was not really on the front edge of some of these issues. And the reality is there were lots of professors and lots of the different, among the 23 campuses, doing some really interesting things on the edge, really thinking about all of the new digital innovations, incorporating them into their classroom, thinking about different ways it could spread across a school and the system. But they were happening a little bit at the edges. And what's been most exciting and promising to me over the last few years is a little bit out of necessity, both because students are just desperately demanding it, and also because of enrollment pressures, we're seeing much more the institution itself shift and really prioritize. So just a couple of months ago, the CSU launched an AI initiative in partnership with a few different big companies out in California. Nice to be located in California for those purposes. That is not something that I don't think we could have seen, both because of where AI as a technology is, but also because I just don't think we as a system had felt that pressure. I don't think the CSU is alone. I think a lot of universities, through both responding to demand from students, responding to pressures, are finding themselves really innovating in new ways. And so a lot of the technologies that exist, that have existed for a while, are now finding more of a foothold than I think they did in the past. So that leaves me very hopeful. And look, technology alone is never a panacea. And a lot of these are finding new ways to meet students where they are, finding ways to ensure that we can offer more courses, that more students can have access to them in the ways they need, providing the supports that students need. So I find myself pretty hopeful about where we are.
Want to know what AI-powered people focus really looks like? The 2025 Engage Summit will show you how AI transforms engagement without losing the human touch. Join us June 24th through 25th in Charlotte for actionable insights, hands-on demos, and transformative strategies. Enrollify listeners save $50 with code Enrollify50. Sign up now at engage.element451.com. I appreciate that perspective of like the stars aligning for even like a whole system, or, I'm sure this is a story for any number of institutions and things, of just sort of like, if they were sort of having some reticence or just not a sense of urgency around this for any number of reasons, like it is now a moment where there's going to be that sort of like enrollment pressure, the student demand that I think has been there for a long time, and just sort of like irrefutable sort of necessity, or kind of just like the objective kind of realization of like the efficiency gains or effectiveness gains of just a variety of kind of a whole digital kind of ecosystem and digital infrastructure for institutions. Because I've even had some conversations recently with folks like talking about like mobile credentials and being able to have your student ID in your phone and like Apple Wallet and stuff, and like just that like seamless nature of like getting into buildings or reserving study rooms and what, like that sort of like whole sort of like infrastructure that some institution to be like, well, yeah, I mean, that might be nice to have or whatever, but it's like some, students anymore, I'm sure, like, they wouldn't precisely say like, oh, well, you don't have reservable study rooms that I can like open with my phone. I'm going to go here because they have it. It's just sort of like you're generally sending a message of like, we understand the kind of the benefits, the gains, the demands, for all this kind of stuff of like kind of our whole digital infrastructure, so it'd be sort of like just very clear, I guess, if, institutions are making those sort of investments. Again, there's just a lot of different versions of it if it is online courses or whatever else. And I think we've seen a lot of progress there, but that I think, that's going to become more of the norm, even for, shall we say the late adopters, within sort of the whole higher ed ecosystem and everything. And I think it is even just the idea of every institution doing it their own way as well, where it's just like, take your own flavor. It's like, you got to do something though. Like you do need to sort of adopt and sort of integrate, kind of adapt to this sort of moment a bit, but like you can still do it your way. So I'm curious to get that sort of like perspective you have, certainly, just looking at higher ed as kind of the whole ecosystem, that idea of like starting somewhere, bringing in sort of, digital transformation to your institution, but having it still feel like you're doing it your way.
Well, and I think the interesting thing, it's going to be interesting to see how standalone universities versus systems are approaching this. So that's, one thing that I just think a fair amount about. And the second piece, I guess I would say is it's interesting having a foot in both the K-12 and the higher ed world to see the role that professional development and professional learning plays. What I hear from professors all the time is look, I don't want to paint with too broad of a brushstroke, but lots of enthusiasm, excitement about integrating some of these tools, and no awareness of when and how to get better at those things. And if and left to their own devices, they then are left to essentially go try and get some professional development on their own. And so then they're trying one thing, and yet there's no way to have one common system that the university has said, yep, here it is, and everyone must now go do this professional development to learn how to use this particular tool. So universities are in a tough spot because they can't go mandate the professional development. Professors are in a tough spot because they don't have access to some of the professional development to use some of the greatest tools that they're excited about pursuing. And so we're feeling pretty stuck. I think systems have a little bit of a hack in that we can find ways to offer it across and in ways that maybe one individual university couldn't. So but I do think this notion of how do we train professors to use some of these tools has been one of the hardest nuts to crack. And I think systems have a chance to do it in a way that single sites are probably harder pressed. And honestly, I've just spent less time thinking about how they cross that finish line.
I think there's something there though. And I think it is just even a broader acknowledgement of like, even the most kind of razzle dazzle, amazing ed tech tool or whatever else out there is only as good as sort of the implementation of it, which includes like, really just good training and sort of, empathy of, you're going to have a whole kind of suite of faculty members or staff members, whatever, all coming from different places and perspectives of just sort of like comfort, with these tools or familiarity with them. And I think, trying to just be mindful of that and recognize that, like I'm sure a lot of folks, at these institutions are earnestly interested in bringing in, various digital tools for their work. And how are you evaluating the tools? How are you thinking through how they're going to be implemented, and how are you going to train people on them so that they do kind of reach their full potential? So definitely those are like just some details of, digital transformation that I think are important for people to be considerate of, because I think if it's just sort of some sort of leadership in an institution that's just like, we have to digitally transform, it's like, okay, just pump the brakes. Again, it's good. We do need to be doing that. We do need to start somewhere, but you do need to do it in a way that is sort of thoughtful, empathetic, patient, considerate, all those sort of things, and that you're bringing in sort of a full kind of consensus and coalition around like, this is the direction that we are going to be going in. We're going to be making investments in these tools. We're going to be kind of, integrating our tech stack to make sure everything kind of plays nice and talks nice to each other. So I think, the sort of like kind of higher level, like systems, kind of thinking, I guess, or just sort of like, how is everything just going to like, play nice with each other, I guess.
Yep.
Phrasing again, but I've been asking this as kind of our final question for a lot of folks, but What are you seeing on the horizon that you think higher leaders really need to be keeping an eye on and anticipating as they're kind of developing their strategy moving forward?
I'm going to try and bucket a few things into one answer here. Let's see how this goes. I'll return for a second to the new classification that we're introducing at the end of April, the student access and earnings classification. As the name would suggest, one of the metrics we're really looking at is earnings post-college. That's not by mistake. We know that earnings are not the only thing that matter in college, but we know they are one thing that matters tremendously. And the more and more we're hearing from young people, and all of the research we're seeing is showing that more and more young people, especially those who come in low income, say it is one of the single biggest drivers that they need to see. So if you think about that as sort of a foundation for the answer, something that we're seeing more and more universities across the country really try and rethink is, okay, so how can I do a better job of preparing the young people, the students who are here, when they graduate, to graduate with a degree that leaves them ready to directly enter the workforce in a well-paying job? Now, some people are like, oh, it's calling into question career services. I think that's an obvious place, but we're also seeing that it's calling into question some other pretty core choices. Are students earning credentials alongside some of this? Are students getting opportunities to do internships, to gain real life experience? Are we finding ways to build social capital in the students who we have on our campuses? Each one of these, I think, is an effort to try and get better at saying, it doesn't matter if, I graduated with a degree in political science, right? I spent one ill-fated year in Washington, D.C. I have never done another job for which that direct degree was related. And it has helped me in 100 different ways. We need to find better ways to both build those set of skills, to name those, to put that in a way that is transferable to the outside world, and then to connect the students who we're serving to that outside world such that they can get their foot in the door and then get a job and then a better job and then build a career. And we're seeing more and more of that at universities. We hope that this classification will shine a light on some of the folks doing this best so that we can learn what are they doing. And what I would venture to say is they may have some better career services, but we bet there's going to be a whole lot more that's built in at a systemic level that other universities can learn from and begin to replicate as more and more are trying to do this and improve earnings for their students. But we believe in doing that, recruit and retain more students who now begin to see, oh yeah, this really is paying off. And I'll leave you with, we're really hopeful at almost that's our 10, 20-year play is, putting something like this out into the world can improve outcomes at universities across the country and sort of rebuild this sector.
Yeah, I mean, that's great stuff because I think that's getting a bit more tangible or specific around just like the relevance question, like how do institutions maintain, relevance with today's learners and everything. It is that, idea of credentials, certainly in addition to a four-year degree and just being able to have a better handle on the specific skills that you've gained. Like some students are just better at understanding like, oh yeah, I learned these things and we'll like put them in my resume or whatever else, but that just being kind of happenstance and very, very unreliable in terms of ensuring that all students do get to have really, gainful employment, from the get-go, because I think we've seen that too, that, kind of highlighting how kind of what you do, what you earn, from that first job, is not going to like define the rest of your career, but it just is sort of like, it's a shame when we realize like, oh, well, yeah, you didn't really, get into the right job to begin with. It's just going to maybe just create a little bit more friction for you to be, kind of gainfully employed and have have the career growth and things that you're looking for. So I think that is very good advice. I appreciate you doing the work to plant the seeds and, harvest great things in the future. And just appreciate you hanging out for this episode here during the busy week of South by EDU. This is super, super informative to me, and I know informative to all our listeners. So appreciate your time.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances you'll like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our Podcast Network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better hired professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Day Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451, a leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.